Hello, welcome to episode 104 of the Online Tennis Podcast. I am very pleased to announce I have Vansh with me to discuss the Cincinnati Masters, Djokovic versus Alcaraz, and of course on the women's side, Coco Gauff versus Karolina Muchova. Vansh, you're just back from Cincinnati. How are you feeling?
Super excited, Jack. I still have adrenaline running from the 10 days that I was at Cincy. And yeah, I can't wait to dive into some of these topics with you.
Now, I was thinking about this, and obviously we're a bit late getting to the show here, but I had to talk to you, Vansh. I felt like you would be the best person to really dissect this with, so it's going to be worth the wait. And I feel like the first place immediately to go to is Djokovic Alcaraz, despite the fact this is going to be some effort to wrap our heads around. First things first, though, just some stats. That makes it nice and simple for everybody to realise the context of this win for Novak. 39th Masters title for him in Cincinnati, one win away from triple golden Masters, of course, just missing a Monte Carlo title for the third time. Surpasses Nadal on the career win count at 1,069 wins. 17th match of his career won after saving match point. Second this year after Corda and Adelaide final. First player to beat Alcaraz in a big final. Alcaraz was 6-love beforehand, 4-love in Masters finals, 2-love in Grand Slam finals. The longest three-set Masters final of all time at 3 hours and 49 minutes. The longest match at Cincinnati ever. Vanch, what's the significance of this match for you? What do you think?
I think it was significant. It was significant for Djokovic to kind of bounce back after the Wimbledon defeat and prove right away that he can still go toe to toe with Carlos. Obviously a 16-year age gap, and I thought it was really just maybe more significant for him because Alcaraz had just won Wimbledon, and for Djokovic to you saw his celebration afterwards, rip his shirt and basically celebrate like he was like it was a Grand Slam final essentially. And you can see in his emotion kind of what he had to go through in this match to get back, obviously playing in insane heat, 98, 99 degrees court temperature. And I was there. It was stuffy, it was hot, it was humid, it was brutal conditions. And Djokovic had played all of his matches at night before, and he had conserved energy, and he'd spent maybe 5 hours on court total in those four matches. It also helped that he got a retirement from ADF in the first round, but nonetheless, conditions wise, I felt like Alcaraz was a little more prepared because he'd been playing more in the day. And the stretch sort of from being 2-4 down for Alcaraz to 7-5, 4-2, where he won 9 of the next 12 games, it was bordering, looking like this is going to be a straight set win for Alcaraz. And his only straight set win, actually, funny enough, of the 2 weeks, because he'd been playing so many three setters. But then once Alcaraz played a very poor game at 4-3 and made three unforced errors on the on the backhand and one on the forehand, he kind of let Djokovic in. And I felt like from that point on, the tennis that we saw from that point on till the end of the match, it is up there. It is top quality. You know, recency bias welcome, but one of the best, highest quality 2 out of 3 set matches I've ever seen, hands down. It was just spectacular from both, and just the ebbs and flows and the twists and turns that this match had, really, from that point on. And all the break points that Alcaraz was able to save until the tie break, all the way until he started cramping with his hands, which I'm sure we'll get to eventually. But from that point on, I mean, it was just a joy to be there live and just see that athleticism and physical endurance and what these guys were putting through. And just I was just thinking, can you imagine if this happened at the US Open and they played this for 5 sets, both guys? Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually insane. There would have had to have been some sort of drop off eventually. It's just like insanity what we kind of witnessed. And as you say, the ebbs and flows. I think a lot of people knock the match for not being consistently as high level as it could have been. But what do you expect from these guys? I mean, it's literally 35 degrees here in Britain, whatever it is over in America in Fahrenheit. It was absolutely roasting, culminated in a Djokovic triple double fault game. And as you say, he managed to come back, kind of rally. And just the fact he mounted this insane comeback, then Alcaraz mounted that insane comeback in the third set, and then it all just culminated into that third set tiebreak. Drama of the highest level in tennis. It was fascinating to watch. Of course, the biggest issue for us, maybe, Vanch, is where do we start? I think start from the second set tiebreak. So Djokovic he survived that game. As you said, Alcaraz had that kind of loose backhand game where he let Djokovic back into it. But all things were pretty even going into the second set tiebreak. Tiebreak records in 2023 for the two of them, 22-5 for Novak, 16-5 for Alcaraz. Two mind-blowing tiebreak records. Something had to give. A few of the points that I have picked out. 3-1 down. Alcaraz comes up with a beautiful drop shot after being pulled out wide. The guy coming up with drop shots or shots that you wouldn't expect from him. He is a guy that is known for his drop shots, but they're normally off the forehand after a little disguise. I did not see that shot coming. The amount of clarity he has under pressure from positions where seemingly that shot wasn't on just astounded me. Immediately, you have to really be maybe a proper purist to really appreciate how difficult the shot was, and then the following shots afterwards. It was a very, very, very impressive point. Not the shots, though, I really want to pick out. Just that was a side note. These are the ones I really want to talk about. Right? 5-6 down and 6-0 for Novak. Of course, 5-6 down is match point. It's another one where he's come back from the brink. Massive serve out wide, plus forehand inside in. Obviously, the forehand inside in, probably the tougher of the forehands that you could have hit, and he pulled it off to perfection. Loved it, sumptuous. But then 6-0, second serve and volley from Novak. So good. Second serve out wide to the forehand. And maybe just a moment for me to talk about a tactic of Djokovic's, Vansh, before I hear your own thoughts. He served into the forehand repeatedly in this match. Repeatedly. The second serve in particular. Similar to Wimbledon, actually, but he used it in a more attacking sense. The second serve average speed went up. He very rarely went passive on that second serve. Maybe that's part of the reason why he triple-double faulted. I don't know. He was trying to be a lot more aggressive going into Carlos's forehand. And he did the same with his first serve as well. I know Novak said at the end of the match he didn't have a great serving day. But the fact he was so clear in his mind what he needed to do with his second serve. Because, of course, if you're in the juice court, fans, you'll know this. Alcaraz loves to grip that backhand, rip it down the line and come into the net. Djokovic completely took that tactic away from Alcaraz. He was aware how much the Spaniard loved to do that. And I loved, despite the fact, again, Novak didn't have the greatest serving day, I loved the fact he stuck to that tactic. And in fact, his serving into the forehand went up as the third set progressed. Very, very, very interesting stuff, Vansh. What did you think about the tiebreak, Djokovic's tactics, etc.?
So I'm 100% with you on the second serve. I thought that was one of the keys to the match for Djokovic, winning 64% of his second serve points. And not just the percentages, but like you said, his tactical awareness, because he knows that Alcaraz also wants to go back on the second serve return, put a bit more height and shape on it, and bother Djokovic with his weight of shot. So that's kind of the tactic when Alcaraz moves back. So what does Djokovic do to counteract it? He serves in volleys, and that's what he did. That's what he did, for example, against Medvedev when after the U.S. Open, and he hadn't played in a while. And 2 months later, then he goes and wins Paris Masters. He does this, and in that case, it was very extreme. It was every other point, and it obviously works a lot better against Daniil. But regardless, he took that option away. And then whenever Alcaraz moved in on the second serve and tried to do his aggressive, almost saber-like returning that we've seen Federer do, on his backhand, Djokovic goes 120 on the second serve. Sometimes there was one second serve in particular. He hit 120 and had to check the radar gun to see if it was false, and it absolutely wasn't. He didn't even double fault that much. He had such conviction and clarity in his second serve. And then also just I've never seen him volley this well either. Like under pressure in big moments, the technique on the volleys, it was really, really solid from him at net, and he had to do that. And funny enough, all of Alcaraz's opponents this week, they were all great volleyers. You look at Purcell, you look at Thompson, you look at Hurkacz, you look at Paul. They're all great at the net, and it actually took away some baseline rhythm from Carlos, and it caused him to doubt himself a little bit on his ground strokes. And that definitely took place in the final in some big moments. And I thought the match point save was absolutely brilliant. There was nothing Alcaraz could have done, on that match point, and just a really, really well played second set tiebreak by both. Actually, it was one of the highest quality breakers you'll see. 9-7 in favor of Djokovic.
Moving into the third set, stats start to go a little out the window because it was proper, pure, intense drama. I mean, as Novak put it, incredible poise from Carlos on big points. He saved 4 championship points before he eventually lost in the third set tiebreak. We are talking match point saved with a serve and volley. We are talking match point saved with phenomenalness that you just need to watch the highlights of and see it for yourself. Insane. Third was actually a double fault from Novak.
Yeah.
And then the fourth was an insane forehand winner down the line that, again, doesn't even match the second one or the first one for me, but it was still an insane way to save a match point. What were you thinking when you were watching that match?
The oohs and ahs from the crowd, when he was saving these match points, and especially the running forehand pass that he hit. I mean, maybe you could argue that Djokovic could have angled that volley a little bit better and a little bit shorter, and maybe Alcaraz wouldn't have gotten it. But insane shot. How do you come up with that on down match point and find that little open space? And then Djokovic, you could see his reaction afterwards. He was just laughing at the absurdity of it. He complimented Carlos for that shot so many times in many interviews after the match, and he just could not believe this kid's willingness to suffer and his resilience and actually believing he can turn this match around. He compared a lot of those things to playing Rafa 10 years ago, and you could really see that. And it was just you knew that there was a twist coming. You knew Alcaraz wouldn't just fold and go away 6-3, and I had the feeling that the next service game was going to be another twist. And when you're serving a big match out like that, you can't always come up with the goods. As we saw, he double faulted on the third match point. That one really kind of surprised me because he actually decelerated on that, and he said afterwards it was one of the slowest second serves he's ever hit.
Oh yeah, so it was. Yeah, he did say he was tight, didn't he, Vansh? Yeah.
Yeah. But understandably so. Like with the pressure that Alcaraz was applying, and also the boldness this guy has to go for his shots in really big moments, he does not hold back.
Right, going into the third set tiebreak, Vansh, I'm gonna summarize a few things for you, my thoughts, and then I'd like to hear your own thoughts. Because there is a moment first that might get skimmed by. Novak's down 5-6, he's down love 15, and he touched on it in the post-match interview. He just seen 4 championship points go by. He'd lost 2 break points at 5-all. Suddenly he was under the cosh, and he served 3 unreturnables and a +1 at 5-6, one of the best service games he's played the entire match. Then in the tiebreak as well, the tiebreak, of course, probably not as high quality as the second one, but still had its moments. But we were at 4-all, the heat of the battle really, really catching up to both guys. Djokovic hits an amazing forehand inside in, but he's still got 2 points to win. And obviously with a returner like Carlos on the other side, who knows what's going to happen, comes up with another 2 unreturnables. The first one in particular, exceptional. Bang on the line, out wide, no way Carlos is getting it back, right? And that ends up being a small kind of catalyst or turning point in the match. I think Novak is still the master on hard courts, deservedly, because he is still a better spot server than the rest of his peers, including Carlos. And you could see that for certain looking at the graphic showing where Carlos was putting his first serves compared to Novak. And 34% unreturnable from Novak, 24% unreturnable from Alcaraz. And then I've got the cluster of first serves on the screen now for you guys. You can see, if you draw a line about half a metre away from the service lines, Alcaraz is hitting about 38% of his serves, his first serves, within that zone. Djokovic is hitting about 65% of his serves within that zone. You don't need to be a genius to watch Djokovic serving and realise he is getting closer and closer to the sidelines than Carlos on a more consistent basis. Now, I know Djokovic said he had a bad serving day. He probably relatively did. And at the end of the day, the serve isn't going to be the be-all and end-all of this matchup. But when the margins are so slim, it's quite a big difference, especially on a hard court when it's quite quick and obviously it was really hot. What's your thoughts there, Vansh?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like him being a better spot server, I would totally agree with that. You don't need to watch it that closely to realize how well he can serve out wide, how well he can hit his spots, even if he's not getting aces, because Alcaraz is one of the toughest players to ace. So Alcaraz did actually hit more, but in terms of unreturned serves, he won that battle, and it came down to some of those big points in the tiebreak. I still thought Alcaraz's second serve was pretty effective, in terms of the kick on it, and he can still bother Djokovic's return with the heavy kicker, and particularly he upped his first serve. I thought from other previous matches, he kept it very solid to win. I think over 70% of his first serve points against Djokovic is something to be proud of if you're Alcaraz. But on the second serve in particular, the clarity that Djokovic had, and in particular in key moments in the tiebreaks, like you so pointed out, match point down, and also at 4, and also the 2 unreturnables to close out the match, and in the 5-6 game, his spot serving, his variation on the first serve, and just his ability to keep Alcaraz's return at bay, which is one of the best returns ever, certainly especially in 2023. So he was able to to really do this in a very complete kind of serving profile, which maybe wasn't always at his very best, but in key moments he had it, and that's all you needed to win matches like this. You need to have that in key moments, and I felt like when the chips were down, particularly the point he played at 4-all to get the mini break especially, and yes, Alcaraz's hand was cramping, but it still didn't bother him that much to the point where it was a runaway tiebreak. So I think you can be very happy if you're Novak, because he did lose the mini break initially because Alcaraz missed he double faulted and he missed the second serve by a sliver, and he still managed to get that break back with kind of a kamikaze return coming in, and was very effective, and he just knocked off a beautiful drop volley on his forehand, and then once it was 4-all, that's when, yeah, that was very impressive that he was able to close it out right there and then and there and win the next 3 points. And obviously a kind of bad return, at 6-4 for Alcaraz, and he was kind of shaking his hand a little bit afterwards, but nonetheless, I mean, it was Djokovic put himself in really great position, and really deserved to win both tiebreaks, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you're kind of touching on there, it's probably pretty reductive to suggest that it was just the serve that made the difference in the end. But it made a slight difference. Definitely. As you say, tied at 4-all, and that was the way Djokovic pulled himself over the line, even if Alcaraz was suffering a little bit. But yeah, obviously, so much bigger than all the stats and just the significance of it, the drama. If you just want to take all the stats out the side, one of the best matches I've seen all year for certain. Might end up being the best one. Maybe Wimbledon bigger, it might be bigger actually. But anyway, Djokovic after the match, he touched on it. He said, "You never give up. Alcaraz Spaniards never die." Djokovic said, "I've experienced that before." He did say it was like Nadal when they were at the prime of their careers. Each point is a hustle. Each point is a battle. You feel like you're not going to get maybe in total 5 3-points in the entire match, is what he said, which you've got to basically earn every single point. That is the kind of big free rivalry at its peak that we used to enjoy all the time, and this rivalry really does feel very, very similar. This was the absolute, poster for this rivalry going forward, and if we get this at the US Open again, it's going to be absolutely phenomenal. Vansh.
The chemistry that they have after the match is over, and just kind of, how sporting they are, and then also just in the moment, just how much they're having to suffer just to win points and win these long exchanges. It's just tennis from another planet, and this rivalry and the Alcaraz Sinner rivalry, like, more please, because it's as many as we can get, pretty much every event. It's a huge win for the casual fan, for the diehard fan, for every fan basically.
I'm going to take a strange detour before we move on to Coco Gauff's one. Strange, I don't know. Some might see it coming, but I want to just talk about Hubi Hurkacz for just a little bit,
Sure.
right? Because he's been a few points away from pulling off some serious scalps first and foremost. But had he won those two matches against Alcaraz, the one in Canada and the one here, I mean, we'd be looking at Hubi Hurkacz as like a US Open favourite almost. Like, they would have been some serious, well, maybe, but they would have been some serious scalps. But I mean, ifs, buts, and maybes, if doesn't exist. This is what I want to get into, right? So 5 tiebreaks played against Alcaraz in their head-to-head, 5 tiebreaks won for Carlitos, tiebreak record for Hubi Hurkacz in the last 52 weeks, 0-9 versus the top 10, and 30-22 versus everyone else. Once again, Hubi Hurkacz's forehand let him down a little bit. And I just want to do a little technical piece here and talk about what is going on there. We see Hubi Hurkacz primarily going cross-court with his forehand. And again, I'll put up some GIFs here just to show you what's going on. You can see immediately the contact point that he has is far less extended than Alcaraz's, which generally makes him a lot more able to sort of hook the forehand cross-court. He kind of comes across it a lot more. And when he tends to go inside out, the ball tends to be a lot flatter, a lot less safe. He comes across the ball, so you sometimes see the forehand getting sprayed wide or to the right? Yeah. And as a rule of thumb, as coaches, we generally tell players, never ever miss your forehand inside out wide, right? And you can see the way that Hubi Hurkacz hits it is a little awkward. Match point down, we saw that, or match point up, sorry, we saw that in Cincinnati. He sprayed the forehand, a fairly short forehand, out to the right. He did the same thing in the tiebreak whilst up 4-2. It felt like a serious opportunity missed, and there's not much he would have to change, Vansh, to then be seriously in contention for some big titles, I would say.
Yeah, the forehand has been kind of the sword that has either led to his game collapsing or him playing a lot better. Like when he's not under pressure with it, when he's serving brilliantly, when he's coming in behind the forehand, I find he's a lot more effective just because he's a lot better at finishing points at net, and he's a lot better at defending, from 6 feet behind the baseline. But when he has to play kind of in between those two areas, that's when he tends to struggle a little bit more. When he has to generate his own pace, when he has time on the ball, that's when you sort of see the hitch that his forehand has, because the swing is a little awkward, the grip sure is a little extreme, but if you accelerate through it, like we've seen with Coco Gauff that we'll talk about later, and also with Iga, if you accelerate through it rather than guide through it, then you're going to have a lot more success. You just have to. It's the aggressive intent, and sometimes in big moments, Hurkacz just lacks that aggressive intent. He doubts himself just for a split second. The footwork is a little bit wonky, and so is just it has some technical limitations, as you've highlighted in terms of the swing. So that gets in his way, and he does miss a lot wide, and that's certainly something you don't want to do. You want to hit just safer targets and just believe that your volley will be good enough to finish it off. And he just didn't allow himself to get to the net and have that finishing chance,
Yeah,
which he might have been able to do, because the rest of his performance up until that point was amazing. The
yeah,
serving was off the charts, and these courts, I thought, because the ball is bouncing, because the ball skips so much, it stays so low. When he's contacting it, obviously he's got kind of like that Andy Murray style bunt backhand, so that certainly helps him. He moves very well for his height, so he has a lot of great things in his game, and if he can just fix that forehand, then there's no reason he shouldn't be outside the top 10.
speaking of wonky forehands, or not so wonky in this case, because Coco Gauff has won Cincinnati, fifth title of her career, third this season. First big title is the headline, though. The youngest champion ever at Cincinnati. The first place for me to start, probably Vansh, would be her win over Iga, because of course she was love 7 in the head to head, love 14 in sets. You obviously predicted she would win a set at least. You obviously had an idea that Coco's game could be effective. Could you maybe talk us through a little bit why the game she used at the French Open was a sort of precursor to her performance here, and maybe why it worked, the improvements that she has in her game and stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So actually, at the French Open, I thought tactically she played it a lot better, even though she lost 4-2. That maybe doesn't quite do it as much justice, because I watched that match very closely, and her ability to hit the higher loopier forehand and set up her backhand down the line, that was actually causing Swiatek a little bit of problems. She was mixing up spins very effectively. Her footwork was a little bit better when she had time, particularly on second serves. She was willing to kind of, you know, put a little bit more height on her second serve returns. She obviously has really good footwork. She was better in position, but just at times I felt like other shots in her game let her down in the French Open match, and she maybe was overthinking it, and she didn't have the clarity that she has now. But now, with having Brad Gilbert on her coaching team along with Parariba and her parents a little bit taking a back seat, you're starting to see that it's not even so much as isolating just the forehand and working on that, because I still think the stroke has some ways to go. It's certainly improved, but it's just her mindset is a lot more aggressive, and you can see that in terms of how she's taking the ball a lot earlier. She's not guiding the ball as much. She's not decelerating anymore on her forehand, and she still has the same grip. They haven't actually changed the grip or done anything, extreme with that. It's more just the footwork and the aggressive intent, and that's what I saw. And she just relied on her strengths, which is her defense, her athleticism. Her first serve was the biggest shot on the court. It was so effective in this match against Coco. The amount of free points that she was able to get, the amount of unreturnables that she got, just the way she mixed up her location, the way she was able to set up, uh, the way she was able to set up her backhand sometimes in her rallies with the forehand, and kind of pick the right moment to go down the line with the backhand, because that's a really big shot for her, the backhand down the line. As well as the serving, and I loved how she took her chances and came to the net. She was very bold in big moments, and it was actually Swiatek who was having to press a lot and just couldn't get any finishes because of how well Coco was covering the court. And that's one area where she can really match Iga in the movement and kind of speed for speed. I think she's the fastest player on the WTA tour, just in terms
Yeah.
of how she covers her court. In terms of raw athleticism and maybe just combining everything with the tennis, you might give Iga the nod, but they're very very comparable. And if Coco continues in this path, it actually makes sense that she would win a few matches against Iga, and the matches would become a lot closer. It's just that there was such a big gap in their forehand quality before Wimbledon every single time they played. But now there's just, even though it's not completely fixed, it's just one or two little things that she's hunkered down on, in this period before Washington, and it's starting to really pay off. And this was a really, really big win. You have to take this win really, really seriously, because
Yeah,
was it Iga at her very best? No, but it was still, Iga in pretty decent form. I mean, she'd still won the second set. I still thought she was going to win the match. So, and this is an Iga who was up 5-3 serving for the first set. So this could have been a straight set win for Iga, and nonetheless, Gauff showed tremendous poise under pressure, and she saved those two
yeah,
set points in the first set, got it to a tiebreak, played a great tiebreak, and she absolutely deserved this. And even Iga afterwards, it was very telling to me in the post match press conference. She's normally very hard on herself after defeats, but after this one, she said, "I got what I wanted out of Cincy and Canada, and I gave it my absolute best, and I didn't always play my best, but I fought with what I had, and Coco just played outstanding today." And she really lauded Coco as a competitor and as a player, and she said that, it feels right that she should win one or two of these matches, because she has improved so much in the last year. And so yeah, this was a really big win to take note of before the U.S. Open, and for me, she's
yeah.
one of the top four contenders for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Just a few things to flesh out there just before we move on. Certainly, you touched on the serve there, and I love the way that Brad Gilbert pitched her own serve to Coco, telling her how good a shot it was, how she should be going for it. And she almost had this mindset, she said before, where she was just trying to put the first serve in
Yeah,
as opposed to actually going aggressive with it. And that's sometimes why we're starting to see a few double faults creep back into the game as well, as she kind of gets used to not doubting herself in those moments. There was the occasional time against Muchova where she threw in a double fault, trying to go a little bit aggressive or feeling a little bit nervy, I guess. But against Swiatek, she said afterwards, she was trying to just go for the serve. She was just
yeah,
thinking about, I'm just going to hit this as hard as I can, which sounds like a little bit of a naive approach, but actually going body against Iga with pace is a pretty effective move. You're not going to get the serve round Iga. She's the best returner on the stretch in the game for me, for sure. So it's a good idea just to go straight at her. And she got quite a few free points doing that. She deserved to get cheap points because
yeah.
Coco, pound for pound, is probably one of the biggest servers in the game.
Yes,
For She can put some serious heat on the serve.
and she sometimes chooses not to, but when she does, boy, like, she should just go after her first serve way, way more
Yeah,
often, because it's a little bit of a kind of an Andy Murray thing, actually. Like, whenever Andy Murray went after his first serve, he was hitting at 130, 135, and he could hit all the spots, and his game was just ultra effective at his very best.
yeah, absolutely. And then talking a little bit about the forehand, you said certainly it's got more solid, but there's definitely stuff she can still improve on it. But she was talking about in her press conferences how a lot of the work has been trying to get more set offensively with her footwork.
Yeah,
That's why the backhand's certainly improving as well, and then taking her opportunities when she gets them. But she had that segment of the year, or that portion of the year right after Wimbledon when she got knocked out in the first round, where she was able to work on this. And she touched on the fact it's very hard to change parts of your game when you're actually on tour and you're still playing.
yeah.
So I would almost argue the loss to Sophia Kenin ended up being a bit of a blessing in disguise because she
Yeah,
had that time
sometimes you
to,
have to hit rock bottom to figure out what you want to do, and for her, that was a serious period of actually, stagnation. Because, I mean, obviously at the highest standard, but like, from getting to the final last year in Roland Garros to that Wimbledon first round loss, there just wasn't many positives to take away from anything, on court. There were no amazingly big wins or really big confidence boosting performances for her. So for her to actually, like, kind of go in the garage a little bit and work on that and realize that, okay, I need to make some serious changes. She mentioned this, that she was up late at night, several nights for the last 1 year, in the middle of the night, trying to figure out how to fix this. What do I do? What do I do? And you know, albeit she was on track, like, she is only 19 and she is still achieving things. I still sometimes have to do a double take when I see stats about how she's the youngest teenager since so and so, and stuff from up to ace, because I'm like, in my mind, she's really a veteran now because she's been on tour for 4 years and since that breakthrough. So for her to contemplate those two things in her mind and still seriously work on her game and change this narrative around her, that's a really hard thing to do, and she's managed to do this in such a short period of time. And she needed to beat Iga in order to really show the world that, okay, like, that's the That's the biggest test, because you can say the forehand is improved, you can say these things have improved, but until you meet Iga with that kind of weight of shot, that kind of pace, that kind of spin, that is the ultimate aha
Yeah.
moment that yes, Gauff has arrived.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You could see when she was hanging in the rallies with Iga, and just she said it herself. No longer a liability, right? No
Yeah.
3 points off of that side. That is the ultimate test,
Yes.
and she passed for
Yeah.
sure. I still
And
think
she really backs herself. She didn't go on too much of a high after this win either. She's like, I told myself before this match, I'm Coco Gauff, I can do it. And so some real confidence, and she backed it up. So the very next day.
little side note to Iga's almost changing tactics, by the way. She resorted to trying to create pressure on the forehand by using quite frequent net approaches. I think Goff did say that she didn't think Iga was coming in off the wrong balls or anything. I don't think she was either, but she definitely was in at the net more frequently than she usually would be, I would have
Yes.
said. And
Because she was having trouble finishing Gauff from the baseline, and she figured,
yeah,
that's my only path to victory here is try to come forward and just apply a bit of pressure that way, and maybe create some doubt in those down strokes. But
yeah,
and to be fair, it did work. She came on some really good approaches, and she was able to finish at net. Albeit the match point, she misses that forehand ball. She misses that forehand volley, but again, Goff
yeah.
is just refusing to give up in some of these rallies.
I want to talk a little bit about the final as well, and Karolina Muchova proving, obviously, as we knew, that French Open wasn't just a flash in the pan. She's going to be a contender in most big tournaments for certain. The level she showed against Sabalenka, for example, was absolutely outstanding.
Yeah.
Great serving volleys in the ad court to pressurise Sabalenka's backhand. Fantastic defence, floating back slices and lacing forehands on the stretch to keep Sabalenka completely rattled. A masterclass for me in balancing offense and defense, and someone to learn from every single time she steps on court. Muchova is a fascinating player, but seeing her style contrast with Gauff's was similarly fascinating, because a lot of players maybe, or people would have said Muchova had a pretty good chance there. She obviously does, but I would have said relatively Gauff isn't a great matchup for her.
Yes.
Gauff is probably the best defensive player potentially. We've Swiatek probably. I'm maybe getting ahead of myself, but certainly one of the best defensive players, as you say, one of the fastest players for certain. Somebody that takes away the ability to finish net points with ease. She's got good sort of cat and mouse ability as well, if you want to put it that way. Those kind of rat-a-tat-tat points, Gauff is going to come up on top of a lot of those points for sure. We saw a bit of that in the final too. And okay, Muchova was waning a bit physically in this match. Gauff actually said herself that she wasn't near her best in that final match. Gave herself a 6 out of 10, in fact. Said the same for Muchova. The conditions were difficult. But I still think at their best, Gauff would still come in as a slight favourite for sure. Just the way she's able
Yes.
to get every single ball of Muchova's makes her play a little bit more aggressively than I think she would like, Vansh.
Yeah, for sure. And I really liked how she dealt with the variation that Muchova throws at you on her backhand. And she did that by hitting heavy, high topspin balls and forcing Muchova to hit over her shoulder and slice a lot of balls that maybe otherwise she would take as two-handed backhands. Or Muchova has every shot in the book, but her two-handed backhand, just like Barty's, it's not one of the strongest shots, I would say. Unless she's really stepping in, taking it early on the rise, on the shoulder, then maybe she can do some damage with the backhand line drive. But there were times in this match where Gauff was just so effective at extending rallies, at responding with slices herself sometimes, especially on the forehand. She was also slicing a lot of balls, forcing Muchova kind of in that waiting pattern, and then getting a short ball herself and actually doing something with it in the middle of the court. Here's Coco Gauff stepping in and on forehands and coming forward and being aggressive with them off of low slices. This is progress. Like, this is not something you normally wouldn't see Gauff running around her backhand that often and coming up with aggressive, intentful inside out forehands, or sometimes inside in, and just coming in behind them. And it just applied so much pressure, and she won so many points being offensive with that from the middle of the court. And I thought that was huge. You combine that with the
Yeah,
serving, you combine that with just how many errors she was getting off of Muchova, because Muchova felt at some point that she has to finish points quickly because she was struggling physically. From she'd played 3 setters before this, and I think also her abdomen was strapped, which worries me a little bit, because that's one
Yeah.
area of Muhova's body that's always been constantly injured the last 2 years. But anyway, um, yeah, it was just so complete. And Goff went up 6-3, 5-2, and she served for it. And actually, she got a little tight. She made some errors, but I felt like they were the right errors because she was going for them. So I felt like if she gives herself another chance, she's going to close this out the second time for sure, because the lead was so big, and also I just felt like she had a bit of a cushion in terms of this matchup. And I got reminded of the fact watching this that Coco Gauff was the only player in 2022 in the month of January who took a set off of Ash Barty, and that counts for something because Barty and Muchova have a very similar style, and so if Gauff was
Yeah.
able to do that to the best version of Ash, then I think your point is right that this is a good matchup for Coco. And if they play again, I'm curious to see if it's not in the final, if it's in when they're maybe not at their tip top shape or at the very end of a tournament when they're fatigued. I'm curious to see how this matchup plays out because Goff has a lot of things in her game that can cause
Yeah.
problems.
Yeah. Looking at the rankings now, I guess, in the US Open, a little bit of a D2 here. Muchova now making her top 10 debut at number 10, right next to compatriot Vondrousova at number 9.
About time.
I
About
know,
time for
yeah, 100%. That's 4 checks in a row, by the way. 9,
yeah.
10, 11, 12. I think Kvitova and Krejcikova rounding out that list. And then Gauff, still number 6 in the world, does mean that she, has a chance of getting drawn. Iga again in the quarters, whatever. We always knew that would be the case. She's going to have one of those players to play at some point in the tournament, whatever. How are you feeling about the US Open on both sides, Vanch? Is there anything that we didn't know before Cincinnati that we now do know, I guess?
So I think on the men's side, it's very clear that Djokovic and Alcaraz have separated themselves from the pack, and they're by far the best two favorites. It's like splitting hairs between the two. Like who would you have as number one, and that's all draw dependent. But the rest, it feels like there's a bit of a gap. Medvedev might come in, and Sinner certainly deserves to be in the top four, but it's still like there's a bit of gap between those two. But on the women's side, it does feel like any number of 5 or 6 players can win it, and you have to look at obviously Rybakina has been a bit injured as of late, really since Rome, and hasn't been able to get that momentum going purely because of her health. Sabalenka, we've seen a little bit shaky now since Madrid. Just a little bit shakier on the serve, a little bit less confident in her ground strokes, and particularly she also has that semifinal hurdle in majors where she's 1-5. Um, so there's that as well. And then Pagula, I thought, has made some real strides this by winning Canada and beating Swiatek and Gauff. So you could certainly say she's got better. You could certainly say Gauff has got better. Jabeur is certainly, you can't count her out because she's made 3 major finals, and regardless of form, she can still come into the. She suffered a little bit of an injury here against Sabalenka in Cincinnati, but still it was a good matchup until that point, and you can't count her out for the U.S. Open. And then obviously you have Muchova and you have Vondrousova. So I feel like, and this is a much stronger top 8 now, this year at this time than last year, where it really feels like going into these matchups, I'm not actually that confident in one person winning them. And now that Goff has got that monkey off her back in a big win over Iga, and you look at Pagula as well, those matchups now, they don't. It doesn't seem improbable that on any given day she could win these, even in a major, because she's now won 2 Masters 1000s. Yes, she's 0-6 in major quarterfinals, but is Iga really a bad matchup for her on a hard court? I don't think so. She's won 2 of the last 3, and even their matches last year at some point were close. And she's a great returner, and she breaks Iga many times. And even against Rybakina and Sabalenka, she can certainly hold her own and is very consistent and steady. And if they're a little bit off, Pagula can beat them. So you know, it would be something crazy actually, and really amazing for U.S. tennis, because you have Goff winning Cincinnati, you have Pagula winning Canada. Imagine if they met each other in the final. It's not out of the realm of possibility that they're on
Not at
opposite
all.
halves of the draw, and they play each other in the final, and that decides the U.S. Open. That would be a great story, actually.
That'd be really good. They might be in the doubles final as well. Who knows, Vanch? That would be
Yeah,
just a cherry on top. That would be great. Yeah, I'm in the same
I'm not.
boat.
I'm not predicting that, of course, because I still
Yeah,
think Iga is a slight favorite. She deserves that status, but I think,
yeah.
but it's not out of the realm of possibility that either one of those two could win it.
Yeah, we've summarised Cincinnati about as much as we can. That
Yeah.
was a great conversation, Vance. Really, really enjoyed having you on. Hope you enjoyed Cincinnati. You've got a US Open stint coming on. Enjoy it, Vance. It'll be very, very good. Thank you very much for coming on. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Anytime, Jack. Pleasure as always.
And cheers, everybody, for listening. Give us a like and a subscribe on YouTube. This has been the On the Line Tennis Podcast. We'll catch you very soon. Thank you very much.
Cheers.